Hey everyone, and welcome back to another edition of NASCAR DFS Preview. I'm AustYn.
And I am Yacs.
And we are going down to Darlington, South Carolina for the Cookout Southern 500.
Southern 500.
So this is our second race at Darlington this year. Last year we did the 3-race deal just because of the way the schedule played out.
It's been a while since we had 2 Darlington races.
Pretty much, yeah,
A long time.
yeah. Which is exciting. I do think it needs to have 2 anyway.
Yeah.
It's good to have 2 on the circuit. So, it's an oddly shaped track. It's 1.3 something, 66 miles or something.
367, something like that. Pretty close.
Unlike any other track on the circuit that we go to. So, in terms of picking your DFS lineups, it's really difficult to find another track that has the same kind of style.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Homestead to me, I guess, would be the closest thing, just because sometimes you can ride up on the wall.
Yeah.
And again, Homestead's a great track too, but it really doesn't have a track like it. It was supposed to mimic Indianapolis in one of the corners, and gosh, I'm completely blanking on the track.
I know what you're talking about, but I don't remember the track either.
Farmington? I don't know.
I don't remember.
Maybe it was in Farmington.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Anyway, it was supposed to be an old historic track that I don't think is active anymore.
Yeah.
But it was supposed to mimic those sort of.
2 different size turns, entries, and exits, and it's really odd.
A lot of
really
speed.
odd.
Yeah, a lot of speed going in the corner. A lot of patience to lay off the throttle, kind of feather it in the corners. You kind of want your car to drift up and down. Tire management is very key here too.
Hard to pass.
Hard to pass, yep. A lot of dive bombs, kind of.
Yeah.
Or slide jobs, I guess is what they call them.
2 wide's about all you can do.
Yes.
3 you can't. And
3's tough.
That's pushing it. 2 wide's pushing it in a lot of cases, but yeah, 3 wide, no chance.
Yep.
In most cases.
Yep. And we've both been there. It's just one of my favorite tracks for sure that I've ever been to.
Yeah.
In terms of the way the track drives and everything, and it is 367 laps. It's a little long, but now that they have stages, it breaks it up a little bit better. You don't see a lot of wrecks here, really. Just because it's so. This is my opinion on this. I think the drivers are so into it that they try their hardest to not make a mistake, and they're not trying to force the issue into making it, like you said, 3 wide or. Even, a lot of them don't push it too wide, to be honest.
If they go in too hard, they'll slam that wall.
Yep. So they'll get the Darlington Stripe.
Yep.
Historic Darlington Stripe.
Oh, yeah.
It's also the start of the NASCAR playoffs. So we'll be starting that too. The 16-driver field has been set. The first 16 drivers in the starting lineup are going to be playoff drivers. So 17th on back is basically using the formula that they haven't put in place. So that's going to be something to consider as well. Gosh, I guess that pretty much covers it. I'm trying to think of anything.
Yeah, I don't have anything else I want to add, really. Trying to think.
Yeah.
I don't think I have anything.
That's pretty much it. So let's go ahead and see what DraftKings has to offer for us here. So Kyle Larson is your most expensive driver at 11.5. He's starting in 6th spot. Kyle Busch starting in 12th at 11.2. Martin Trex Jr. starting in 10th at 11,000. William Byron 14th, 10.7. Brad Keselowski starting in 16th at 10.4. And then Joey Logano is starting in 11th at 10,100. So it's pretty obvious to me where to go here, and I know that a lot of people are going to have this mindset. In terms of my strategy with this, Martin Trex Jr., he won the first race, the initial race of this season at Darlington, led well over 200-some laps. I think he's going to be strong here. He's got an average finish of 11.2, so the historic, historic. His history here at this track is pretty good. One of his better tracks for sure, and he's one of the better drivers in terms of saving his equipment. And that's one of the reasons why he's so good. But I'm going to go ahead and pick Kyle Larson here. So he's starting in 6th spot. He's at 11.5. Hard for me not to go with Kyle Larson starting in 6th. I believe he's going to get up there pretty early and lead a lot of laps. He ran okay in the first race this season, but in terms of pure... He's the best driver at this track among active drivers. He's got an average finish of 6th. I believe he started around 7 or 8 races. All but one has been a top 10, and it was like a 14th. This is the best car he's ever driven in his career, and I feel like he may be a little chalky, but we're going with him anyway. Starting in 6th there at 11.5. Now, I will go ahead and scroll on down here to the bottom tier, and let's see. How about Justin Haley is starting in 20th? Had that good race last week at Daytona, which he typically does. But I'm going to cut it off here at Corey Lejoy, starting in 25th. This is a track that Corey is not very good at, so I don't advise picking him. His average finish is around 28th or 9th, and he's starting in 25th. That's probably about where he'll end up. One driver that is pretty good here is Ryan Newman. I didn't have his average finish written down, but I know in the last 4 or 5 races he's finished inside the top 15, maybe more than that. So he is a pretty good value in 5,700. Anthony Alfredo, I've lost all confidence in Anthony Alfredo. I had him picked last week at Daytona just because of the restrictor plate and stuff. And I believe every time they had a wreck, he went to slow it down and he spun out every single time. I'm like, it's 400... Not that I could go out there and do it, but it's 450 horsepower, and he's spinning it out like that. Can you imagine if they were driving the old speeds? Mm-hmm. I just don't. I think he's a good driver. I just think he's just not ready. And I also heard that Front Row Motorsports is actually selling a charter, so they're going to be a 1-car team next year. So that's not good.
On that note, I heard JTG Daugherty is too.
Yep.
They're only going to be a one car team next year as well.
Going to be different. And Colleague is actually fielding 2 full-time cars. Mm-hmm. So don't know who the driver's going to be.
Yeah, I don't know.
But we also got Bubba Wallace there too. But a driver that I'm really, really, really pumped about picking this week.
Really?
Yes, really. Is Chase Briscoe. So he's starting in 24th, he's $6,300. Chase Briscoe is very good at this track. He's won an Xfinity race here. His last 2 Xfinity starts, he led over 50 laps. He actually finished 11th earlier on this season at Darlington. And it's that 750 horsepower package that is going to make Stewart-Haas sort of a contender this week, I believe. So look for Chase Briscoe there. That leaves us with $8,000 salary, but I've got to pick another one down in this area, and that is Eric Jones. Eric Jones at 6,100, starting in 22nd spot. He did finish 18th here this season in the Richard Petty Motorsports car. He has an average finish of 7th here, and of course, he won that a couple of years back in the 20 car. Now, the 43 car definitely does not have the speed that the 20 car did. Nowhere near it, but I do think driver talent plays such a role here at Darlington that I feel like you can't avoid it. And at 6,100, he's actually, I don't know that a lot of people are going to pick him because he's starting in 22nd. But even if he gets me a 16th or 17th or even 18th for sure, that's not a bad value. Because I feel very confident in that Larson, and I'm going to pick another top-tier driver too, but I believe one of those two will lead most of the laps. This is like a short track with the amount of laps that you're running. So let's scroll on up here. I'm really just going to cover who I am going with, to be honest with you. Debenedetto must have had a bad day at Daytona. He's starting in 30th. The other driver that I'm pulling the trigger on, and I know he's going to be chalky, and that is going to be Chris Buescher. So Chris Buescher starting in 34th spot. Doesn't have the greatest history here. He does have like 1 top 10, but he finished inside the top 20 a lot in JTG's equipment. Starting in 34th, you can't really pass that up. Buescher getting a top 20 is not out of the question, and really like him in that spot, 7,800. That leaves us with 9,150, and as you can see, like Kurt Busch starting in 3rd, Ryan Blaney on the pole. This is when Ryan Blaney's one of his worst tracks. He's got 1 top 10, and I know he wasn't a dirt racer, but his dad having the dirt racing background, you'd think he'd be a little better at Darlington.
Yeah.
But maybe
he's on a hot streak though. He is on one heck of a hot streak.
Yeah. I mean, he could just shock the world. I saw Dale Jarrett made his final 4 picks, and he put Ryan Blaney in the final 4. He had Larson, Elliott, Blaney, and Kyle Busch. Yep. So I mean, I could see it happening, I guess. Trying to think, the first 3 races are going to be Darlington, Richmond, and Bristol. That's probably the best 3 races in the entire playoffs. Mm-hmm. I like the Roval. I don't know how I feel about Talladega being in. I guess one is okay, one of those big plate tracks. I hate the fact that Daytona is our deciding race for.
Yeah, that just sucks.
It really does. Richmond was so good at that, and honestly, the fact that of course, Homestead in August would probably be hot, but I think Homestead would be a good cut race too. Now that it's not the finale.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got Chris Buescher there. That leaves us with 91.50, and here's another driver that I'm pulling the trigger on. Ricky Stenhouse is not the guy I'm going with, but he's starting in 29th. I think you can consider him in this spot, but I'm going with Cole Custer at 7,100. Cole Custer is got a great history here in the Xfinity Series. He has won here just like Briscoe. And starting in 31st, I feel like he could get a top 20. He didn't finish. He wrecked in the earlier race this season, but he did run well. And Cole Custer could be I feel like a lot of people are losing faith in him as well. Fantasy points per race is 20.1. That is right there with B.J. McLeod. And, how about B.J. McLeod has more fantasy points than Anthony Alfredo? Anyway, Cole Custer, I think he's a good option there in 31st. And that leaves us with 11-2. We can pick anybody that we want. And I know you're thinking Kyle Busch, but I'm going with Martin Truex Jr. I do think that William Byron is a good option. He's starting in 14th. Hendrick Motorsports would be a great choice there, getting Larson and Byron. But I like Truex there. So, yeah, that's pretty much the lineup that I'm rolling with. Another good option that you can go with here, being that Larson's my automatic pick, Alex Bulman has a good track record here. His average finish is inside the 20th spot, which means even when he was in BK Racing and Tommy Baldwin, he was getting decent finishes, which is that's saying a lot.
Yep.
And he's starting in 5th in a Hendrick Motorsports car. Hendrick always does well at Darlington. So look for him to contend. That's not a bad option to go there, too. I do think you have to pick Chase Briscoe. Sorry, Chase. Anyway, I think you have to go with Briscoe there, 6,300. And I do believe that you have to go with Chris Buescher. I will still, you can go Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and still afford a Christopher Bell, which I think that's a squad there, to be honest with you. Stenhouse doesn't have the greatest track record here. But if you go with a Cole Custer,
that's a good starting spot, though.
You could still get Austin Dillon, which is not bad. Dillon's pretty good here. Average finished around 12th. Ross Chastain is okay. Tyler Reddick, I think Reddick will be picked quite heavily because people know about him riding that high line. He might be a good pick this week. I don't know. But
he may be in the pits all night, though, too. Who knows?
Could be. With the 13 sets of tires, they will be pitting a lot. But I don't know if you're talking about that kind of pitting.
So, well, we'll see. I don't know.
I
think he'll do good. As long as he keeps it off the wall.
Pretty much, yep. And so yeah, that's what we're rolling with. I think that Larson's a good starting point. I could afford Truex, so he's not a bad option. Your cheapest tier option though, Chase Briscoe is like automatic to me. And then Chris Buescher will be pretty highly owned, but Cole Custer or Eric Jones sneak in and get you something there. Ryan Newman would be an okay value too. So Ryan Newman or Eric Jones are good values. So that's what I got with DraftKings. Let's head it over to Yachts for FanDuel.
Alrighty. We're kicking off the playoffs with Darlington. I actually like that. I like that they're starting this year off with the playoffs at Darlington.
Yeah, I do too.
I think it sucked that, like you said, that Daytona was the cutoff. That sucked.
It's such a wild card.
Yeah, and I get that it's really intense for the fans, but as a driver that's trying to make the cutoff, that's so sucky. I feel like, in my opinion. But we're getting the playoffs started off right. We're going to move down to, we're going to look at the tier 1 this week. Not really a lot's changing from week to week, and it's probably not going to from here on out. Kyle Larson, Truex, Busch, Hamlin, and Elliott are your tier 1 drivers this week. Much like the strategy AustYn's working with, Kyle Larson, that's who we're going with right out of the gate. 2.3 average in his last 3. 2018, he led 284 of the 367 laps.
He hadn't won.
And he hasn't won. And he finished second in the May race. He's been the best driver all year, no doubt about it. And I'm looking for that momentum to just carry on through the playoffs. Now, we'll see what happens. 10 races, a lot can happen, and from race to race, a lot can happen. But he's more than likely just going to advance until like at least the bottom 8, no matter how he's running, because he's just got so much of an advantage on the rest of the field. But we'll see. I think he's going to have a good car this week. I mean, you really don't know until you get into the race how good of a car they have. But based on what I've seen all year and what we've seen all year, Kyle Larson's had the best car this year. Mm-hmm. And I think he's an automatic pick for Darlington because it's such a driver's track, and he's been far and away the best driver this year. We're going to move on down, though. I don't think you really consider these guys down at the bottom because they're going to get lapped. They're going to get lapped. There's a lot of green flag laps at Darlington. On average, basically 12 people finish on the lead lap each race. It's not a lot. So,
and that's sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's the tough thing. I did pick a lot of drivers starting towards the back, so I mean that could come back to bite.
It could be a bad thing, but it could be a good thing. You just got to pick the right drivers that are starting towards the back. But we're going to move on up. I don't think you really consider these. Justin Haley's he's been running pretty well the last couple of races. Well, he finished 8th at where was that at? That was at a road course, right?
Yeah.
A couple weeks ago. But I'm blanking.
The Indy one.
Yep, the Indy race. Yep, I totally forgot. And he finished 6th at Daytona this past race. So he's been on a good little stretch here, but you really can't really go with these guys. Ryan Newman, decent history here. I don't think you're really going to go with him, though, but it really wouldn't hurt. 19th, that's a good enough place where you could pick him, but it could also come back to bite you. So we'll see about that. Chase Briscoe was one I was really considering this week, starting at 24th. He has a good history here. He finished pretty well in the May race, if I'm not mistaken. I think he got a top 15, if I'm not mistaken.
Briscoe?
Yeah.
11th.
11th, yeah. Mm-hmm. I knew it was close. It was in between a top 10 and a top 15. So you could really consider him this week. Eric Jones has got a good history here. Really good history. But in the Petty car, who knows? We'll see. I don't know how – you mentioned how well he ran. I don't remember what it was. But
18th earlier this year.
That's about where he's going to start. So, I mean, he could get you top 15. Who knows? But I think there's better value around, especially for FanDuel. And like Austin mentioned, it's going to be a lot of chalkiness with this guy. But we're going to go with him. Chris Buescher, 7,500, starting 34th. And he really doesn't have a bad history here. 19.2 average in his last 6. That's not great. Not really good. But the main thing that I'm really focusing on with a lot of these drivers is lead lap finishes. You want the guys staying on the lead lap because those laps yield you points in FanDuel. 4 of the last 6, he's been on the lead lap, and he's completed 99.6 of his laps in his 8 races at Darlington. So that for an option that cheap, I think that's pretty good, especially starting 34th. Like we mentioned earlier, it's going to be hard to pass here. It always is, but you got to take a risk on some of these people because the starting spots are they're too crazy to pass up in a lot of cases. And we're not going to stray too far away from that. Matt Debenedetto. Starting in 30th. Debenedetto has a better track record, believe it or not, here than Chris Buescher. 14.2 in his last 5. And 2 of those are top 10s. So he doesn't really stray too far away from the top 20. apparently, because, I mean, he's got a 14.2 average finish in his last 5. Also, Debenedetto is racing for a ride next year. So that could give him a little more motivation. I'm kind of looking at that as a little... He could be looking for that motivation to have a good run in these last 10 races to get a good ride. Probably not in the Cup Series, but maybe like a Joe Gibbs ride in the Xfinity Series or whatever it may be. Just to get a good ride next year, good steady ride. Because he's good enough to be in a good ride, I feel like. He's at that cutoff line, though, with his talent and what we've seen so far. And it's just hard to decipher about him some races, but I think this is a good pick for him. This week, I think it's going to be a good pick. We're going to move up, though. And we're picking within this area. Ryan Blaney, like I said earlier, he's on a hot streak, but not the greatest of track record here. Kurt Busch, it was announced last Saturday, that he's going to be the newest addition of the 2311 team. He's going to be running the 45 car. And that's interesting news coming out of that camp. We'll see what happens there. But we're going to move on down. We're not picking him this week. The third place, he's good here. He's won here, if I'm not mistaken, a couple times, maybe. I know he's won here. But if I'm not mistaken, he has.
And Kurt?
Yeah.
I don't think he has, actually.
I thought he had. But anyway,
Nope.
Oh, he hasn't.
Mm-mm.
He's ran pretty well here, though. I could have swore he won a race here, but who knows? I guess he didn't. Christopher Bell, I think that's a good enough spot at 13th where you could pull the trigger on him, especially at 9,200. And actually, I had Christopher Bell in my lineup as of a couple hours ago, and I changed it. I think he's going to have a good race, but you can see right here his fantasy points really aren't on par with a lot of these guys if you're looking at the fantasy points per game or per race. He's 43. Well, it's not that bad. I thought I was onto something there, but I guess I'm not. He's average. Okay. Never mind. I thought I was onto something. Tyler Reddick's a good option. I don't really like the 7th starting spot. I think he'll finish well, but I don't like the 7th starting spot. I think that's gonna push a lot of people away with that. But we're gonna go with Austin Dillon, 8,500, starting at 21st. Austin Dillon surprisingly has a good track record here. Well, maybe not too surprising, but 12.5 in his last 6, and he didn't stray too far away in his 10 career races here. 12.4 average, so he's very consistent here. Very, very consistent. And I didn't go with the lead lap finishes. I didn't even look up that stat for him. But one thing I found interesting that I was looking at, he only has one finish outside of the top 20 at Darlington. And starting at 21st, that's what you want. You want positive position differential, especially with a guy at 8,500 like Austin Dillon. And I think he's proven before. I think it wasn't in May. Well, no, it wasn't in May. But he did finish in the top 5 a couple times in the last few races, if I'm not mistaken. He's had
finished second last year.
Last year, I couldn't remember if it was in May or if Kyle Larson finished second in May. Yeah, that's what it was. So he's had a good run. 8,500. That's a good price for him. But we're going to move up. We have 12,200 left to spend. We can get a lot of these good drivers up here. We talked about Ryan Blaney, so I'll cut him off. Some of these racers, it's just not that tempting because of their starting position. I think of this sample size right here that you see. I think each of them have a chance to win the race. Obviously, they have good. Some of them have good track records here. Some of them just have been performing really well this year, and they could just pop a win out of nowhere with any of these. But Chase Elliott, I don't know. I don't know how well he's ran here. I don't think he's got that great of a track record here, but he can win at any time. Kevin Harvick has an excellent track record here, but as of late, he's just kind of been meh. So I'm not going with Kevin Harvick, and I think he's going to finish in or around 9th place, 10th place. I think that's where he's going to finish. William Byron, I think he'll finish above the 14th starting spot, but I don't think it's going to be much higher than that. We can't afford Denny Hamlin, so I'm not even going to talk about him. But Denny Hamlin does have a good track record here. So if you can afford Denny Hamlin, by all means, you can pick him for sure. And I think the second starting spot, that puts him in a good position to lead some laps. I don't know how many laps, but lead some laps at least. Keselowski, I think he's just waiting it out for Roush, but who knows? I don't know. He's starting in 16th. He has a good track record here. I think he could get you a good finish, but seems like he's just kind of been meh too. So we're going to go with Joey Logano. That's why I wore the shirt. Joey Logano, starting in 11th. He has a good track record here. 9.3 average finish in his last 6. 5 of his last 9. 5 of his last 9. That's not really an awesome stat, but I had to pull a stat out of somewhere. 5 out of his last 9 have been top 5s. So
that's pretty good. If
he finishes in the top 5, which is very possible, he's had a string of bad luck here lately, and I think he's in playoff mode. I think he's been in the top 4. It feels like every year, not every year of the last 5, but pretty much every year of the last 5. Basically, three or 4 out of the last 5 years, he's been in the top 4. So he's always in playoff mode when it comes playoff time, if that makes any sense. He doesn't have a win here, which is kind of surprising, but I think he could compete for a win this week for sure. And especially, I'll talk about this later, but we have a safety blanket if he doesn't really compete for the win. And lead lap finishes, he's had six of his last 9. He's finished on the lead lap. That's important. That's important, and when you're picking in fantasy, especially FanDuel, you want guys that are going to be, like I said, your top 15. Usually, they're in and out of the lead lap. That's kind of the bubble, and you want your guys to be within that bubble at the end of the day. And Joey Logano's about as solid as you can get for that sort of thing. We're going to clean this line up though a little bit. Going to go up Kyle Larson, kicking the playoffs off. Mm-hmm. 14,000. He's the highest priced driver. I think he's going to stay up there unless he really slams the wall hard. He'll probably hit the wall a couple times anyway. Unless he really slams the wall hard, he's probably not going to stray too far away from that top 5. If not, he's going to win the race. 2.3 average in his last 3, and he finished 2nd in May. So he's definitely our safety blanket, if you want to call him our safety blanket for Joey Logano. If Joey Logano can't really compete for the win, that's a heck of a safety blanket. I'll just say that. Logano, I'm hoping he's going to compete for the win. I think he's definitely going to compete for a top 5, and that's what you want. 9.3 average finish in his last 6, so he's got a good track record here. We picked a lot of guys within this area. Austin Dillon, good track record here, 12.5 in his last 6, 12.4 in his career in 10 races. He's only had 1 finish outside of the top 20, which is crazy. And that 1 finish was 24th. So it wasn't that far away from the top 20. So really good pick, I feel like, at 21st. I think he's kind of going to be picked a lot, but you kind of got to give and take with some of those things, especially in FanDuel, because you're going to have guys that are going to be 40% on a few of them, and then you just got to have a couple guys that are maybe not as much owned. Debenedetto, 14.2 average in his last 5, and he's just a really solid driver, and he's racing for a ride really next year, and I think these last 10 is going to be it's really going to be a benchmark for him to not really turn it around, because he's ran well at some of these tracks, but it's going to be a new turning point for him, I feel like. And Chris Buescher, I think Chris Buescher is going to be the most owned driver, probably in DraftKings and FanDuel, because he's priced well. He's starting at the back, practically. But he's got a good value here. He's completed 99.6 of his only 8 races at Darlington. That's what you want out of your least expensive option with what you're going with, and that's going to be our least expensive option this week. So that's what I have for FanDuel, and we'll wrap this thing up.
Yeah, so there you see the two differing strategies in terms of DraftKings and FanDuel. FanDuel, laps completed are majorly important, and you don't have many drivers that finished on the lead lap. So with DraftKings, I think maybe I did pick a few drivers that were starting towards the back a little bit too much there. But I do think that the drivers that perform well here, it doesn't really matter where they start typically. There are a few drivers that just have it. It's one of those skill tracks that is so different.
They have so many bailouts now.
Yeah.
Like you think back in the day, they didn't really have the lucky dogs. They didn't have the stages. They didn't have a lot of things. And there's a lot of bailouts that they can have, and a lot more pit stops that they're doing, so they can really regain track position those ways.
Yeah, and the competition caution stuff to me is starting to...
That too.
It's like, I get it if it's a fresh track, it just rained, or, first time they've been to this track and there's not been any activity that weekend, but they're running the trucks in Xfinity, and I haven't looked for sure, but I feel like they always do a comp caution in the Cup race.
And part of that is probably just because they're not qualifying. They're not practicing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably the reason why they're doing it so much, but I don't know.
It's just odd.
It is.
Yeah.
Because they go to these tracks so often, and these drivers know this track. I mean, other than like a couple drivers, like the younger drivers, everybody knows the track, and the track's not changed that drastically. The cars have maybe changed, but the track really hasn't.
Yeah.
Any given track.
Yeah, and I think they paved like turn 2 here.
Yeah.
From last time, so that's going to be different, but yeah. So that's what we got for DraftKings and FanDuel. If you like what you see here, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also hit the bell notification, lets you know when our videos go up, and like, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Follow us on Twitter at TheSportsChief and on www.thesportschief.com, also on Instagram as well. Same TheSportsChief. So best of luck to you. I know I'm going to be excited to watch the Labor Day weekend here at Darlington.
AEW All Out Sunday night.
There you go.
Cookout Southern 500 Sunday night. It's going to be a tough night.
Yep.
I'm going to have to pick and choose, or maybe watch both.
Yep.
So we'll see.
A lot of good stuff going on.
Yep.
All right, so best of luck to you with the Cookout Southern 500, and have a good race weekend and Labor Day weekend.
All righty, thank you.